a huge playground. And I was very fortunate. I ended up getting into the RAF while I was at university, and they in fact ended up paying for me at university in my last year. And then afterwards I went to join the RAF and got on okay during the training. I ended up on what I wanted to fly, which was Harriers, the single-seat ground attack, sort of unusual fighter-type airplane. And had a terrific... I survived, put it that way. That was one of the best ways of describing it.
And your father before you was an RAF?
Yes, my father was in the RAF as well at the end of the Second World War, and he also flew helicopters afterwards in the very early days of helicopters. So he had a long and successful, i.e. survived, career in flying, and then became a farmer and never looked at an airplane again.
And you took over, when you left the RAF, you took over the farm?
Yes, that's right, yeah. My dad was ill and had 6 months to go, and I was at a stage where I had to make a decision about my RAF career, so I decided, yeah, I've done the best I'm going to be doing now, and from now on it was going to be paperwork and administration. So
hairy moments during your career as well,
hairy moments. I mean, one always has hairy moments. The hairiest moments probably were the least frightening moments. The most frightening things that can happen usually in the air are things that you know are going to happen a long way in advance, whereas the things that are spectacular and the things that are, in hindsight, quite dangerous at the time usually aren't actually that frightening to the person in the aircraft. I mean, for example, I've had several close calls with mid-air collisions in other aircraft, which you practice combat with other aircraft. And at one stage I have a picture in my mind which I'll take to the grave of another aircraft, Harrier, where I could see the pilot's face through the cockpit about a foot away as he tumbled over the top of my airplane. Why our airplanes didn't touch, I have no idea. I believe in guardian angels, and mine was working overtime that day. But that was there and gone in the space of 5 seconds. Another experience I had lasted 3 hours and was the most terrifying experience of my whole life, because I knew what was going to happen at the end of 3 hours, and there was very little that I could do about it. And me and 2 colleagues of mine were all very, very fortunate to survive. And
where was that?
We were crossing the Atlantic. We were supposed to have had a tanker, an air-to-air refueling tanker, which at the last minute was called away, so we went on our own. So we had enough fuel, but we didn't have any spare fuel, but we had to land in Iceland on the way to refuel there. And we'd gone past Greenland, heading northeast, and when we got past point of no return, which meant we couldn't go back to Greenland, we heard that Iceland had gone into fog. And suddenly there were 3 of us in these airplanes, and we didn't have anywhere to go. So we asked them in Iceland to send up a search and rescue helicopter so that if we ended up ejecting, that they'd be able to pick us up quickly. But they said, no, the weather was too bad. And to make a long story short, we got down, but we had to break all the rules to do that. And
all the time, you're contemplating.
2.5 hours of, I'm really going to be in the dwang here. Must be my fault. It's funny, most of the thing that goes through your mind is somehow hurt or injured. It's actually, or being, the things that go through your mind are quite extraordinary. For example, about 10 days ago, I had an interesting experience where I was ferrying a Spitfire from the UK to Germany for a guy, and it was my first ever trip in a Spitfire. It's a beautiful old airplane. It's an unusual undercarriage system. And after I'd done my, photograph over the White Cliffs of Dover, across the English Channel, Glenn Miller music, all that sort of stuff, I suddenly felt a vibration. And it didn't come from somewhere that was good. It was a big vibration up front, and suddenly I thought, ooh, this is not good. And I ended up, the engine actually failed on me. A conrod came out the side of the block of the engine. But my biggest fear wasn't, oh gosh, there are cornfields everywhere, I must get this undercarriage down, I mustn't look stupid by failing to do all the right things. I guess your training comes in automatically. You are going to do, you're going to put the airplane on the ground in one piece, but you're always frightened that the Board of Inquiry, which is a military term for, a jury of your peers will look at what happened, and they'll always find something that you did wrong. You never do everything right, but you have to accept that.
That's what you're thinking about in that instance.
A part of your mind is thinking about that, and actually you shouldn't, because you should really be focused on what you're actually doing. But I guess the impetus to do things right comes from fear, and it's not fear of being hurt or dying, it's fear of looking silly.
All right, peer pressure or whatever. And so the Spitfire, how did it all end up?
It ended up in the right way up. I was very fortunate. We have wonderful systems now, GPS, where you go to the nearest airfield, and it said that the nearest airfield was a place called Saint-Omer, which is an old First World War airfield, very famous First World War airfield. and it happened, the wind was the right direction, and I managed in the right place at the right time and managed to get it on the ground. We were lucky, and we were particularly lucky, as it's also...
You also had to eject at one stage?
Yes.
Where was that?
That happened also. The day after I got engaged to Vicky, my wife, who was also in the RAF,
you were in the RAF at this
I was
stage.
in the RAF, and I'd been fairly experienced on Harriers, and I was leading a 4-aircraft formation on an air-to-air refuelling mission to the southwest of England, which was a thinly disguised excuse to fly 4 airplanes past Vicky's station to give her a wave the day after I got engaged. But the British taxpayer was paying for very serious training, of course.
Right.
But suddenly nothing happened as far as she was concerned, because these 4 airplanes which were promised to come past with her, all of her students were out ready to give us a wave back. Nothing happened, and then they heard on the radio that an airplane had crashed at Yeovilton just down the road. She immediately knew it was me and jumped in her car and rushed down there and got a bollocking from the chap on the gate for not having her hat. I think she gave him a dirty look, and I know those dirty looks.
Yes.
And I was okay. I was fortunate again. I'd had an engine failure. A circlip had been incorrectly fitted in the engine fuel control unit, possibly up to 2 or 3 years beforehand. And it took a long time to come out, but it just happened to pop out the moment I was coming in with a generator failure, which is another unconcerned minor emergency. Landing, all the fire engines were there ready to go because I'd had declared a generator failure, and next thing was the engine stopped. So I was fortunate, I was very well trained. I had witnessed somebody ejecting from exactly that situation about 6 months earlier and thought about it quite a lot. And again, as I pulled the handle, I thought, I'm really going to be in trouble here. I haven't done any of the drills. I haven't tripped the limiters. I haven't dropped my fuel tanks. I haven't checked any of the temperatures.
You haven't followed procedures.
Correct.
You're thinking procedures.
Correct.
I'd be thinking.
I was absolutely terrified
Life.
because you get a thing called temporal distortion. Time is completely distorted. You think it lasts 10 or 15 seconds, and exactly that happened to me. I was thinking, I should have done this as I left, and I remember the airplane going underneath me and a horrible smell of cordite, which I remember to this day, because there's a massive gun goes off underneath you. And I was shooting up the rail. I was thinking, oh no, I've forgotten to do this, and this. When I heard the tapes afterwards, the ejection tone goes off in the aircraft, and it lasted 0.3 of a second before the airplane hit the ground. I was shocked. I didn't realise it had that little time to escape. So I was very fortunate. Martin Baker, the people who manufactured the ejection seats, reckoned I was outside of the envelope for the seat, and that I was very fortunate. And you get a free tie. It's a very expensive free tie, about $7.5 million.
Successful ejection. I'm intrigued, because I haven't gone through that yesterday afternoon. You were talking about adrenaline rush. Actually, it did seem to last forever. I thought it was about. But anyway, just on all of this, you've had a few scrapes, you've had a few near misses, a few hairy moments. Do you not lose your mojo because of what has happened? And it is. You're saying it was safe for me driving down yesterday.
Yeah. Well, you see, everything
statistics show, but at no stage have you been sort of thinking, listen, quiet life.
Most of the stuff that I was describing there was previous life stuff. This is where you're flying fast, military, very dangerous environment, where you're highly trained and you're current, and there is a huge organisation around you making sure or helping you to not make a mistake. But there's no doubt about it. Human error is the largest cause of accidents in aviation. In commercial aviation, which is quite different to the sort of aviation that you and I did, there are procedures, there are usually 2 crew, and you do everything. It's like driving on the motorway, where you have a checklist and you have everything is laid down, and no matter what happens, there is a procedure to follow. Apart from the ended up gliding it in onto the lake or onto the river in New York, being able to think outside of the book and the procedures comes in, and that just comes with experience.
So what you're saying is you don't feel when you're up there that something, you don't think negatively that something. I mean, in the Spitfire last week, you had another example of it where there was engine failure, and
sure, absolutely.
You had to
but
make
that's
an
an unusual
landing.
airplane. You see, that airplane that we fly, for instance, I built that airplane. I know every single one of the 15,000 rivets that are in that airplane. I checked that airplane meticulously. I changed the oil in that airplane every 25 hours, which is more than double the normal time required for a certified airplane. The oil is sent to the States for analysis, and I get on internet a week later. I can see every single constituent in that oil.
But
so I
that's
have a
all
lot of confidence in that aircraft.
But at the same time, deep down, you know...
well, deep down,
you know,
you have to have confidence in the machinery. There are some unknowns. Weather is a big unknown. And then, you know, obviously you have to be very careful that you look at the weather forecast. And then every now and again, you have to have a little chat with yourself to make sure that you don't get too cocky and that you don't, as a pilot, as a general aviation pilot, we are not supervised heavily. We are able to fly on our own. We have tremendous freedom in Ireland to fly in uncontrolled airspace. And often there are little short strips. And there's lots and lots of pitfalls, lots of traps, lots of ways you can make a mistake. And I think if people are aware of their own limitations and make sure that they don't put themselves in situations where they are going to regret afterwards, then that's the way.
And the aerobatics, obviously we went through a few routines yesterday and will never be repeated by me anyway. There were 19 though, there were a list of 19, thankfully we didn't go through all 19. Are there any of them that you'll be doing at the this air display in Bray on Sunday that could be regarded as dangerous?
Well, if someone attempted low-level aerobatics, which is what we're going to be doing at Bray. There's 4 friends of mine who are from the Red Arrows and who now Air Show acts. Another pair of guys coming from the UK are friends of mine, and one ex-Harrier guy and another guy who has a Mustang, but they fly 2 RVs, just like the aircraft that we flew. All of these guys are highly trained and highly skilled, and they're current at what they do. If someone got in an airplane and tried to do some low-level aerobatics, it's very likely they would kill themselves. So it's a very highly specialised area of small airplane flying that takes a bit of training, a bit of knowledge, and a bit of experience. And like everything, you start off with a building block approach. So, you know, it's not something that you should try at home, if you know what I mean. But it isn't dangerous if you know what you're doing, you have the right equipment, and you're practiced and current at it.
And it'll look spectacular from the ground.
This is the other thing as well. It's a little bit like the smoke and mirrors trick. We always try and present it as spectacular, but not something... for instance, you would always, like walking along the edge of a cliff, you always make sure you stay well inside the fence. You can step over the fence and look right over the edge, and that's really dangerous. The general public wouldn't realise how dangerous it was. That's why we have a thing called a display authorisation evaluators around. A guy from the UK comes across and he looks at what we're doing and he says, look, why don't you do something slightly different which will be less hazardous and give you a lot more room for
lower degree of risk.
Correct.
I still think there's a bit of madness in you, Jerry, and I'm going to tell you why. Tell us about flying near the volcano in Iceland. You see, up to now he's making it all sound very rational. Now go on, tell us.
Well,
first of all, what prompted you to fly near the volcano in Iceland?
I have a friend who is probably the only gazillionaire that I know. And he invented something to do with computers a long time ago. And as George Best said, he's been spending it and doing the rest. I met this man and we became, which through a series of circumstances is kept on my farm. And I'm very happy for it to be kept on my farm because anybody who keeps an airplane in my house, the keys must be left in it. So I have to have a go in it every now and again. Anyway, payback time came last year when the volcano came, and Boyd rang me from Australia, or emailed me actually from Australia, said, Jerry, I want to see the volcano. I looked at Harry and thought...
Harry is your son?
My son Harry is here, yes.
Pilot as well.
Harry learned to fly recently. I said, Harry, I think you're going to learn more with me for the next few days than you are in school. Get the sick note out. So we went and collected Boyd. Boyd flew to Barcelona. He couldn't get any closer to... and then flew up to Iceland via his castle in Scotland, as you do, with one of his ex-wives in it, I think. And off we went to Scotland, where we went right up to the volcano and...
to have a peek.
Well, it had to be done. The whole of Europe was grounded.
Yeah. How were you allowed to fly then?
Well, we mentioned earlier on about commercial flying, and everything's very procedural. So commercial aircraft were not allowed to fly because there might be a small risk that they would ingest something in their engines. However, I don't really want to get into politics, but in my opinion, there is a greater risk from bird strikes. In the history of the world, an airplane has never ever been lost through volcanic ash, ever. Just about every week airplanes are lost through bird strikes, and yet we don't close airports. We don't close airports where there are known to be migrating birds. We don't close the whole of Europe because there are a bunch of storks migrating from one and the other. It's a little bit of hysteria on the part of the media, possibly, and the public are brainwashed into thinking that because there's a volcano in Iceland that we're all going to somehow fall out the sky.
How close to the volcano did you fly? Close?
Well, I could feel it. I could hear it. See it on the, if you do a search on YouTube for Hum Volcano, you'll see how close we got.
And I believe there was a recent discovery of something on the plane that was confirmation that you actually did.
Well, actually, I was thinking about that last night, and that actually ain't quite. I don't think that's quite true. I think that airplane had been to Iceland before,
right.
And there was a cinder that was kicked up, and it was lodged in part of the plane, and I suspect that. There was a bit of volcanic rock found. There was a little bit of volcanic rock in the aircraft, but it didn't come from the volcano that day, I suspect.
Well, listen, it sounds like you're a man who loves adventure, but within strict safety procedures, and all of this will be unfolding. You'll be able to see Jerry and his aerobatic colleagues at work on Sunday. Just head down to the Bray seafront for about 3:30 or so. The show starts, and it's free, and you can get more information on it at airspectacular.com, and it's part of the Bray Summer Fest, and it promises to be a wonderful afternoon's entertainment, Jerry.
It certainly does. The weather looks good. It's going to be a great day out, and I'd say if people want to get there early, because usually there's traffic jams, so try and get there a little bit earlier and have a look at the fun fairs. There are all sorts of attractions. The Irish Army Air Corps are going to be there with their helicopters. There are going to be some fun rides. There are going to be some aircraft on the ground for people to see, but also it's a great day out. Weather's going to be nice. We're expecting large crowds. There were about 40 or 50,000 people there last year, so get there early, enjoy the day out. Sunshine, wear sunscreen.
It should be wonderful, and I'd love to be on the ground looking up. I won't be around on Sunday, but that's where I'll be in future. If you're ever going on an afternoon at the Newcastle airfield on one of those little aerobatic rides in your light aircraft, Jerry, don't call me, all right? I've had enough. And we'll finish now. Jerry, thanks a million for coming in this morning, and thank you for yesterday afternoon. You were very, what shall I say, you're a very good, persuasive person when it comes to getting an absolute coward into a light aircraft and